The alarms blared, shrieking across the metallic corridors of the Stellar Vanguard. Ava Stark stood rigid in the command center, hands gripping the armrests of her chair. She hadn't felt fear in years, but now, with every violent tremor, the weight of the unknown pressed down on her chest like a storm cloud ready to burst. The alien fleet was upon them. Multiple impacts on the outer hull, a voice crackled from the comms. Shields are holding, but integrity is failing in Sector 3. Ava's eyes narrowed. Evasive maneuvers. Now. The ship's engines roared to life as her orders were executed. For a moment, she let herself focus on the familiar hum of the ship beneath her boots. The Stellar Vanguard had been her home for 5 years, and the crew, a ragtag mix of seasoned soldiers and scientists, had become her family. She trusted them with her life. But there was something different about today. Something primal. A sense of inevitability clung to the air, as if the universe itself had decided humanity's time had come. Ava, they're hailing us, said Elian Core, the ship's chief scientist, his voice steady but laced with unease. She met his eyes, finding no reassurance there. Elian was brilliant enough to be the one human who could understand the enemy's technology. But even his confidence faltered when it came to the unknown species threatening to wipe them from existence. Put them through, she ordered, her gaze locked on the flashing lights of the battle unfolding in real time. The alien commander's image flickered to life on the screen, a towering figure in dark, ornate armor, with glowing red eyes. He exuded an aura of chilling superiority, his very presence demanding submission. Human, the alien's voice was a cold, calculated drawl. Surrender now. Your species is insignificant, your defense system's laughable. I am Zarnak of the Ktharn Collective. You have no hope of victory. Ava's pulse quickened, but her face remained calm. Zarnak, I don't know what your people think you know about humanity, but you've clearly never encountered us before. Zarnak's lip curled in a cruel smile. Your species is predictable. I've seen countless races fall before my might. You are no different. Ava's fingers flexed, clenching into fists. Every fiber of her being screamed to lash out, to show Zarnak that he was wrong, that humanity would not bow. But she had a mission. And humanity's survival depended on it. Consider this your final warning, Commander, Zarnak sneered. You will all be erased. Prepare for your extinction. The transmission cut off, leaving the eerie hum of static in its wake. Ava stood, her chair screeching against the floor as she pushed away from the command desk. Status report. Now. The crew had already begun to react, moving with the practiced precision that came from years of training. But there was no hiding the fear in their eyes. It was only human, after all. But they were about to show the Ktharn exactly what humanity was capable of. Elian looked up from his console, urgency in his voice. We've detected a weakness in their shield frequency. I can adapt our energy weapons to exploit it, but I'll need time. How much time? Elian swallowed hard. It's going to be close, Ava. We're talking minutes, maybe less. Ava nodded, already calculating their next move. We don't have that long. She turned to Lieutenant Harper, her tactical officer. Prepare the fighters. If we can't stop their ships directly, we'll at least buy Elian enough time to make the adjustments. Harper's lips pressed into a thin line. Aye, Commander. Ava's mind raced. Zarnak was right about one thing, their defense systems were antiquated, barely enough to keep the Ktharn fleet from ripping through them. The Stellar Vanguard wasn't built for a battle like this. But humanity had a history of rising against impossible odds. She wasn't about to let that history end today. She looked back at Elian. You'll have it. We'll hold them off as long as we can. The scientist nodded, his face pale but resolute. As the crew scrambled into position, Ava's thoughts flickered briefly to her younger brother, Ethan, back on Earth. She'd promised him she would come home. But right now, there was no home. There was only survival. Commander, Harper called out, snapping Ava from her thoughts. The first wave is coming in fast. They're using advanced weapons, much stronger than anything we've encountered before. I know, Ava said quietly. But we don't surrender. Not today. Not ever. In the silence that followed, Elian's fingers flew across his console, and Ava watched, the weight of the situation pressing in on her. This was it, their one shot. If they failed now, the Earth would fall. Humanity would fall. But if there was one thing the Ktharn didn't know, it was this: never underestimate humanity. As the Stellar Vanguard shuddered under another barrage, Ava's thoughts crystallized. No matter the cost, they would fight. It was the human way. The vibrations underfoot intensified as the Stellar Vanguard shot through space at full throttle. Ava Stark's pulse quickened, matching the ship's frantic pace. Every minute counted. The crew was running on fumes, adrenaline and raw determination their only fuel. "We've got incoming," Lieutenant Harper's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension in the command center. 2 Ktharn dreadnoughts, closing in fast. Ava didn't flinch. Her focus was razor-sharp. Status of the energy weapon? Elian Kor's voice came through from the science bay, a little breathless. "I'm almost there, Commander. But it's not going to be clean. I need another few minutes." "No time." Ava's voice cut through the static. "Deploy the fighters. We'll buy you as much time as we can." "Aye, Commander," Harper replied, her fingers flying across her console. Ava turned her attention to the tactical screen, where the 2 massive Ktharn ships loomed ominously. Their sheer size made the Stellar Vanguard look like a speck of dust. The alien fleet was a technological nightmare, with shields that seemed impervious to human firepower. "We need to hit them where it counts," Ava muttered to herself. She wasn't sure if the crew had heard her, but they didn't need to. They knew the stakes. "Fighter squadron ready," Harper announced, eyes gleaming with quiet determination. "All ships prepped for launch." Ava nodded, the weight of the decision hanging heavily on her. This wasn't just a battle, it was humanity's final stand. Launch them. Give Elian the time he needs. The fighter pilots, veterans of a dozen campaigns, scrambled to their ships, each cockpit lighting up as they initiated pre-flight checks. They had trained for this, but nothing, not even the most advanced simulations, could prepare them for the battle that was about to unfold. "Commander," Elian's voice crackled again. "I've adjusted the energy weapons as best I can. It's a one-shot deal. If we miss, we're done." Ava's mind raced. She could practically hear the engines of the fighter fleet roar to life as they made their way out of the launch bays. She knew the odds. The Ktharn were far superior in both numbers and firepower. But they had something the aliens didn't. Desperation. "Understood," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "I'll make sure we don't miss." The first volley from the Ktharn dreadnoughts came faster than Ava expected. The Stellar Vanguard shuddered violently as the alien weapon fire slammed into the ship's shields, but they held, barely. The shields flickered and groaned under the strain, and Ava's teeth clenched. "Shields at 40%, the systems officer reported. Divert all power to forward shields." Ava ordered, watching the data streams flash by. Every second felt like an eternity. "Harper, get those fighters into position. We need a diversion." "On it," Harper replied. Her voice held the familiar note of confidence that Ava had come to rely on. But Ava knew better than to assume anything was certain in battle. Confidence could vanish in an instant, swallowed by the weight of the enemy's superior power. Outside, the battle raged in full force. The fighter squadron darted and weaved through the chaos, launching missiles and firing their plasma guns in desperate attempts to disable the alien vessels. It was a symphony of destruction, bright flashes of light against the endless black, the shrill whine of missile locks, and the deep hum of the Stellar Vanguard's weapon systems. But the Ktharn ships barely flinched. Their shields absorbed the hits with contemptuous ease, and their return fire tore through the human fighters with brutal precision. "Commander, we're losing them." Harper's voice broke through the static. "2 ships down, more are getting hit." Ava's stomach twisted, but she couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now. Not when the world was hanging by a thread. Hold the line. The fighters are just a distraction. Elian, how's the weapon? A pause. Then Elian's voice came, tinged with exhaustion but unmistakably focused. Weapons primed. It's ready to fire, but the moment we do, we'll be exposed. I need cover. Ava's hand tightened around the armrest. We'll cover you. Just give us the signal. The fighter squadrons were beginning to falter under the Chtharn's overwhelming firepower. The remaining ships were little more than sparks in the dark, flickering in and out of existence with every direct hit. But amidst the chaos, something shifted in Ava. The loss of the fighters wasn't the end. It was the beginning of humanity's fight, the fight for survival. Harper, she barked. Get every gun we have locked on the lead dreadnought. We make our move now, or we don't make it at all. Aye, Commander, Harper replied with a determined nod. Ava's eyes flicked to the tactical readouts. Every second felt like an eternity. They had one chance. The energy weapon was their only hope. But with their fighter fleet scattered and their shields barely holding, she wasn't sure if even that would be enough. Weapons ready, Elian called out, his voice breaking the tense silence. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. Do it. The ship's main guns fired, the massive energy blast coursing through the Stellar Vanguard's hull and out into space. It streaked toward the lead Chtharn dreadnought, a beam of raw power that cut through the void. For a moment, everything was still. Then the explosion came. The dreadnought's shields flickered once, then collapsed, unable to withstand the focused energy. The ship erupted in a spectacular display of light, its core detonating in a shower of molten fragments. A cheer rose from the command center. But Ava knew the battle wasn't over. One down, but the Chtharn fleet was far from finished. And now, they were coming for her. Ava Stark gripped the command console with white-knuckled intensity, her eyes glued to the tactical readouts. The Stellar Vanguard had taken a heavy hit, but they'd destroyed one of the Chtharn dreadnoughts. The crew was scattered in their positions, their adrenaline-fueled focus unwavering, but there was no denying the overwhelming odds. Even with one ship down, the Chtharn fleet still numbered in the dozens, each vessel a behemoth of deadly precision. Shields at 15%, Commander, the systems officer called out, his voice strained. We can't keep this up much longer. Ava's jaw tightened, a cold rush of determination flooding her veins. We won't go down like this. Harper, she barked, without taking her eyes off the screen. Order the remaining fighters to form up. We need a final distraction. I'll buy you as much time as I can. Harper's face was a mask of grim resolve, but she nodded without hesitation. You heard her, everyone. This is it, people. We give it everything we've got. Outside, the Stellar Vanguard's last remaining fighters tore through space, weaving in and out of enemy fire. The alien ships, though fewer in number, were still relentless. Ava knew they couldn't afford to lose any more. If the fighters didn't do their job, the Vanguard would be left defenseless. We've got another wave coming, Lieutenant Harper called out. Chtharn bombers, closing in on the port side. Ava's fingers tightened around the console as the tactical map filled with incoming markers. The bombers were like vultures, circling their prey, ready to strike a decisive blow. Reinforce the port shields, Ava commanded, her voice cold with resolve. Full power. We've already rerouted everything to the front, Commander, the systems officer replied, his frustration mounting. We can't take any more hits. Ava's pulse quickened. They were running on borrowed time. The bombers were close, too close. Elian, she shouted, the words sharp and urgent. How's the weapon? From the science bay, Elian's voice responded, steady but strained. Weapon still primed, Ava. But I can't promise it'll work twice. There's no time for another calibration. You've got one shot. Ava's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The bombers were almost within range. She exhaled sharply, her mind calculating the final play. We don't have a choice, she said, her voice low but certain. Ready the weapon. The crew on the bridge braced themselves. The moment of truth had arrived. There was no plan B. They had one chance to turn the tide of battle. Weapon charging, Elian's voice crackled over the intercom. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Ava gritted her teeth, her pulse roaring in her ears as the entire ship seemed to hold its breath. Then the Stellar Vanguard shuddered as the weapon fired, the energy beam blasting into the heart of the nearest bomber. The explosion tore through the enemy ship with devastating force, its hull collapsing in on itself, leaving nothing but space debris in its wake. For a split second, everything went still. Then the tactical console exploded with alerts. We've taken out 3 bombers. Harper shouted. But more are coming in. They're retaliating, full force. Ava's eyes flicked over the rapidly changing readouts. The Stellar Vanguard shields were all but gone, the outer hull pockmarked with damage. Every creak of the ship beneath her feet felt like a warning. The Chtharn weren't going to stop. They were relentless. The ship groaned under another hit. The forward shields flickered, then failed completely. The Vanguard lurched as more fire pounded the hull. We can't take much more of this, the systems officer shouted. We're losing integrity in multiple sectors. The core's going to breach soon if we don't. Enough. Ava's voice cut through the chaos. She stood, her gaze locked on the view screen, where the remaining Chtharn ships advanced in a final, unyielding wave. We're not dying today. She turned to Harper, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Gather every remaining fighter and prep for a direct assault. They're coming for us, for Earth. We give them one hell of a fight. Harper nodded. Understood, Commander. You've got it. The bridge fell into a tense silence as the crew scrambled into action. Ava moved to the viewport, staring out into the void, the endless stars now tinged with the dying light of distant battles. The Chtharn had underestimated humanity. They had thought they could crush them without even breaking a sweat. But they hadn't counted on this, the resilience, the unwavering will to fight even when the odds were impossible. Commander, Elian's voice came again, quieter this time. I've analyzed the alien fleet's command structure. They have a flagship, a command ship. If we take that out, we can disrupt their entire fleet. Ava nodded slowly. The flagship. It was the heart of the enemy's strength. Without it, the Chtharn would be in disarray. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. Target their flagship, she ordered. Prepare to engage on my mark. All remaining fighters, form up on me. The command center hummed with activity as the crew worked in concert, their movements sharp and deliberate. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of their impending fight hanging over them. Ready, Commander, Harper reported, her voice calm but fierce. Ava's eyes locked onto the enemy flagship. There was no turning back now. Mark. The Stellar Vanguard surged forward, its battered hull cutting through the void toward the heart of the Chtharn fleet. The final battle had begun. The Stellar Vanguard shuddered under the relentless barrage from the Chtharn flagship. Sparks flew from several consoles, and the ship groaned, as though protesting the violence it endured. Ava Stark remained fixed at the command console, her eyes steely and unwavering. There was no room for fear, no time for hesitation. The crew had given everything, and now, humanity's survival hinged on a single, desperate push. Shields down to 5%, the systems officer shouted, his voice tinged with panic. Hull integrity compromised. Keep it together. Ava snapped, her voice sharp and commanding. Harper, deploy the last of the fighters. We're going to hit them with everything we have. No retreat. Harper didn't hesitate. Fighter squadron, engage. Full throttle. Outside, the remaining fighter craft surged forward, their engines roaring as they closed the gap to the Chtharn flagship. It was a reckless move, a gamble, but there was no other choice. The Chtharn flagship was their last hope, and they were running out of time. Commander, the flagship's targeting our engines, the tactical officer called out, her voice strained. If they hit us there, we'll be dead in the water. Then we can't let them. Ava's lips pressed into a thin line. Focus all fire on their shield generators. Elian, give me a status report on that weapon. In the science bay, Elian's voice came over the intercom, strained but calm. The weapon's primed, but its power output is unstable. It's our last shot, Ava. If we miss, we're finished. Ava's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The Chtharn flagship was massive, its shields like a living wall that absorbed everything they threw at it. But they had no choice. They were out of time. Understood, she said. Harper, prepare the fleet for a final assault. Elian, ready the weapon. We do this now. The command center buzzed with activity, each crew member working with practiced urgency. Outside, the last of the fighters swarmed toward the flagship, firing missiles and plasma blasts in a desperate attempt to weaken the enemy's defenses. Explosions lit up the void, but the Chtharn flagship seemed unaffected, its shields holding strong. Commander, Harper called out, her voice tight. The fighters are taking heavy losses. We can't keep this up much longer. Ava didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the flashing red dots on the screen, marking the incoming fire. She knew the fighters were the distraction. Their sacrifice would pave the way for the Stellar Vanguard's final strike. And in that strike, humanity's last hope rested. Harper, give the fighters one last push, she ordered, her tone firm. Then, we make our move. The fighter pilots responded with unwavering resolve, knowing the cost of their mission. One by one, their ships exploded into bursts of flame and debris as they collided with the Chtharn defenses. But each explosion weakened the enemy's hold, breaking down their shield barriers, creating a breach. Weapon charged, Elian called out, his voice grim. Firing in 5, 4, 3. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. She could hear the roar of the ship's engines, feel the thrum of the weapon as it activated. In that fleeting moment, time seemed to stretch, the fate of humanity teetering on the edge of a blade. 2, 1. The ship trembled as the energy weapon discharged. A brilliant beam of light cut through the vacuum of space, slamming into the heart of the Chtharn flagship. The impact was explosive, a flash of white-hot brilliance that consumed everything in its path. Ava's breath caught in her throat as the flagship's shields flared, flickering once, then collapsing under the intense force. The enemy ship staggered, its form twisting and shuddering as its internal systems failed. Direct hit. Harper yelled, her voice filled with disbelief and triumph. Their shields are down. We've breached the core. The Chtharn flagship staggered, then exploded in a cataclysmic eruption, sending shockwaves through space. The shockwave hit the Stellar Vanguard with enough force to send the ship careening, its hull groaning under the stress. The lights flickered, and for a moment, Ava wondered if they were going to lose everything, but the ship held. The remaining Chtharn ships, disoriented and leaderless, began to break formation, their communications scrambling in the wake of the flagship's destruction. Ava watched as their ranks faltered, their power structures crumbling in real time. Status report. Ava barked, her focus snapping back to the task at hand. We've crippled their fleet, Commander, the tactical officer reported, her voice steady but filled with awe. The remaining ships are retreating. They're abandoning the fight. Ava's chest tightened as a wave of relief flooded her. But it was quickly replaced by the bitter reality that so many lives had been lost in the battle. The cost of this victory would weigh heavily on them all. We did it, Harper said softly, her voice almost a whisper. We actually did it. Ava didn't respond immediately. Her gaze swept across the battlefield, where the debris of the Chtharn ships drifted into the cold emptiness of space. The Stellar Vanguard was battered and broken, but it had survived. They had survived. Humanity is not a race to be underestimated, Ava finally said, her voice firm. We've proven that today. As the crew began to breathe again, Ava's thoughts lingered on what came next. The Chtharn had been a force unlike any they had faced before, but they had broken them. And now, humanity had the chance to rebuild, to recover from the ashes of war. But one thing was clear, the fight for Earth was far from over. The Stellar Vanguard had won the day, but the true challenge of rebuilding was just beginning. For now, though, Ava allowed herself a brief moment of peace. They had won. And that, in itself, was something worth celebrating. But victory was never final. It was just the beginning.